Okay. Hello developers, welcome back to Introduction to Web Development cohort. Today we are going to learn about JavaScript, the long-awaited session. We're going to get started with JavaScript. First, you may want to ask yourself, what is JavaScript? This is a language that helps make websites interactive. It's designed to be easier for humans to read and write, and it's used to make websites interactive, code mobile apps, or create simple games. So you can run JavaScript either directly inside HTML, or you can run JavaScript as a programming language or in its own file or folder. So inside HTML, if you use JavaScript, you can just link it as an external language. But when you want to run it as a separate folder, first you have to install nodejs. So let's go to our browser. We'll search for nodejs. So when you just type for nodejs, you're going to see it. There, click on download. Once it's there, just go to Windows Installer. You'll see that it's already downloading. So it will download the latest version of Node.js. Yeah, so once it's downloaded, you can move over to the folder that it is in. Let's just open that folder. Yeah, so once you double tap on excuse me, the Windows installer pack, if you're using Windows, you'll be prompted to use the setup wizard. Sorry, so just tap. From there, it will guide you on terms and conditions. When you find time, make sure you read through this. Then you have to accept those terms and conditions. Then you proceed. Here you're going to choose the path that you want it installed. Just leave it as default. See program files, then nodejs. Here there is a list of everything that you would want included. So make sure that you have everything checked. Then after which you see that you're being told that some npm modules need to be compiled from C++ when installing. If you want to be able to install such modules, e.g. Python and Visual Studio Code, then you need to do that. So you just click on automatically install. After that, you just tap. You will see a prompt asking you to proceed. So you just tap on accept, and then you'll see the installation process begins. If you already have Node, then it's important, because when you do the installation, the reinstallation, it will do the updating of the Node.js. Maybe your prompts are not exactly similar to mine, are not exactly same, but are similar to mine, just because I already have Node installed in my machine. So it only does the setup, the upgrading of the current Node.js. So it uninstalls the previous one and installs the new one. If you don't have it completely, it installs that Node.js into your machine. You'll be prompted to install additional tools for Node, of which here you see that the script will install Python and Visual Studio Code build tools necessary to compile Node.js native modules. So we are told that Chocolately is required and required, whatever should be installed. So this will require about 3 GB of free disk space plus any necessary space to install Windows updates. This will take a while to run. So you can press any key to continue. Just press any key. So on my end, I already have almost everything that it wants to start installing. But if you don't have, just be patient enough for you to receive those files that are being installed. So these are an example of things that are being installed. Most of these things you realize that you're going to need them as you proceed, but it's good enough if you install all of them at this point, such that you don't have worries in installing single things when you'll need them maybe later. Here you can see that you're given the path from which all things are being downloaded from, to ensure you have a stable internet connection for it to do the complete installation setup. Hello aspiring developers, welcome to today's session. You've already installed Node.js. I believe you're ready to get into JavaScript. So we're going to write our first JavaScript program, and you can see here that this is a comment in JavaScript. And a comment, you can have single line comments, of which they are denoted by 2 backslash signs. You can see them here. And you can also have multi-line comments, and multi-line are just mean many lines. So you denote them by a backslash and an asterisk. Yeah, so that is how to comment in JavaScript. So now let's create a file here. We can call it script.js. And you can just fire up our console. Okay. Yeah, so let's write our first JavaScript program. Say this is a comment in JavaScript. This is a comment. And comments are not visible in the console. But if you want something to be visible in the console, you use this statement console.log. You can say, hooray, here is my first JavaScript program. Now with the help of live server or Five server, we already have our website open. You notice that you have our title there. We also have our h1 tag here, learn JavaScript. And so I believe you already know how to open the developer options. You just right. So now we learn about inputs and outputs in JavaScript. So console.log is one example of how to have an output in JavaScript. An output, we can define it as, let's just have this definition of an output. You can say this is what is being displayed by whatever the code that you're going to give. So you can say that this one is used to show information to users in different ways. One example being a message in the console, but this will only be a message to the developers who use the developer options. Then we see pop-up alerts using the alert function, or you can also take user input using the prompt alert. So now let's try and put all this into action. Let's just come here and say alert. This is my first alert box. And you have a semicolon there. And then you have prompt. You say this is my first prompt. But because we said prompt is for taking user input, let's give it a definitive statement like enter your name. Then we can save it. So now when you go to the browser, you're going to see an alert saying this is my first alert box, and a prompt that will be asking the user to input their name. So this is how to have outputs in JavaScript, and this is how to take a user input in JavaScript. So now let's head over to our browser and see this in action. Yeah, so now here in our browser, when we just refresh, just tap on refresh, you see that there's this alert box saying this is my first alert box. When you tap on OK, now you see a prompt saying enter your name. And as we said, this is how you take user inputs from the browser. So right now we're just taking the input, but we're not storing it anywhere. I was just demonstrating how you can prompt a user to give an input, or how you can output to the user using JavaScript. So now back to our Visual Studio Code. We want to understand about basics of JavaScript. First, we introduced JavaScript as a script tag in our HTML code. But you remember when we created this script.js file, this is also a JavaScript file, but it is external. So if you want to link it, you just use the script tag, but now with the src attribute. So you write there script src attribute, and src, if you remember from CSS, from HTML, sorry, this attribute specifies the URI of an external script, which is an alternative to embedding a script directly within a document. So here you have the equal sign and then the name of the script that you're trying to embed. In our case here it is script.js. So script.js, then you close that script tag. So this is how you link an external JavaScript file in your HTML file. So let's head over to the browser and see the details of this JavaScript file. You can say here another alert and just say, yeah, so you remember there was, let's just refresh. You remember there was this first alert box. This was the inline JavaScript using the script tags, and we wrote the JavaScript codes inside that script tag. So you remember this was the input, where the prompt where the user was being asked to give an input. And then this is now the alert message from the external JavaScript file, and they are executed in order. You notice that, let's just tap on OK. You notice that here you first have hooray inline JavaScript, and then hooray, here is my first JavaScript program. So you notice that this was in index.html on line 23, and this was in script.js on line 3. So we were first having the inline script, which will be executed, followed by the external script that we linked below the inline script. So before we can even use JavaScript in HTML, first we have to understand and appreciate JavaScript as a programming language. And as a programming language, it also has the basic foundations of a programming language, of which here we are going to talk about data types and examples of data types in JavaScript. We have like, okay, let me just quickly type here data types. We have examples like, sorry, first I said backslash, but indeed it's a forward slash. So data types that we have, examples are string as a data type. We have the example of number as a data type. We have the example of Boolean as a data type. Boolean as a data type. We have the example of object. And we also have the example of undefined. And finally, we have null as a data type, just to mention a few. So once you understand what a data type is, we're also going to touch on variables. And variables, these are just containers used to store data that can be referenced and manipulated in a JavaScript program. We're also going to learn about operators. We can learn about control structures. Control structures, and here is where I was talking about the if statements, the loops, and the fors. We can also talk about functions. But now, to begin with, let us first understand what data types are. Yeah, so to understand data types, let's begin with string. First, we can say that in JavaScript, they're denoted using quotation marks or backticks. So an example of a string, we can say let name equals Georges. I can just have this outside the comments. Yeah, so this is an example of a string. Up here we've been using strings all through, and you can use either these double quotations or single quotations or backticks. And backticks is extremely important, especially when you're constructing sentences with Georges isn't lazy. So we realize that if you use single backticks, you're going to experience a problem with this I here, because your compiler understands that the first single quotation mark is used to open the, or rather start the string, and when it finds this, it will interpret it as the second quotation mark used to close the string. So when you want to use it that way, you can use the backslash to escape as an escape symbol. So the backslash can escape it, so such that the browser understands that you're just adding a special character. Also, you can say name equals, then you use the template literals, of which here I'm now speaking about backticks, and you can simply add Georges isn't lazy without having to worry about using the slashes. Okay, without worrying about having to use the slashes. Yeah, so you can either use this template, these backticks, they're known as template literals, to create template literals. Then a second example of a data type is the number. And in the number, you can store either an integer or a float. An integer is a whole number value, like let's say let age equals 10. This is an integer value, and integers we just directly assign them to the variable. Also, we can say let weight equals 10.5. So 10.5, these are float. This is a number that has a decimal. It is also falling under the data type of a number. Then you have Boolean values. Boolean can either be true or false. So we can say let is gender equals true. So this one saves the value of gender as true. Or rather we can say is male. Let's just specify the gender is male. So this is the Boolean data type. We can also have the object data type. Object data type is used to hold complex data. So it is denoted by this square brackets, where you can store dictionary values. By dictionary values, I only mean key value pairs. So here you can say pname, or let's use tutor name, and we say Georges. So there you notice that we are passing a string, then use a comma to add other values like tutor, profession, and you say software engineer. Okay, so these are an example of an object data type. It can be used to store multiple values in a single variable. Then we have the undefined, of which we just initialize a variable. Let's say let my variable, and you don't pass anything to it. This one by default becomes undefined, so that is also a data type. And you can also initialize it to an empty string. So you can say let max equals null to give it a null data type. So here it means that you are assigning a null value to a null data type, as the value of the variable. Now we've been mentioning variables, but we don't know what a variable is. So now let's understand what a variable is. So first, I want you to think of a variable as a container that is used to store data. And this data can be referenced later and used for to be manipulated or during execution. So this is how you can declare a variable in JavaScript. In the olden days, we used to use var as the keyword for declaring variables. So like var my new variable, a new variable equals, what do we give it? Let's give it a string, a number value, 120. But var is not as much used today because it has some confusing behavior, like being function scoped instead of block scoped. So we'll understand more about function scope and block scope when we learn more about functions. So there is this newest way, or rather the modern way of declaring variables, and that is the use of let as a keyword. So let keyword can be used to declare variable. You say best way equals variables. So here I have, as I said, think of a variable as a container. So in this container named best way, I stored the value variables. And this variables was or is a string. And as you noticed while we were discussing about data types, you notice that a variable can store any data type. It can store a string data type. A variable can store a number data type, an object data type. We see it storing a Boolean data type. It can even store, it can be undefined. When you initialize a variable without passing a value, it becomes undefined. And then when you initialize it as an empty variable, you can use the null data type. So all these are variables: name, age, weight, Ismail, person, my variable, marks. All those are variables, and we've declared them using let. And as we said, let is the most commonly used keyword of declaring a variable. So besides let, we also have the const keyword used to declare variables. And I think of const as used to declare constants which should not change after they are assigned. So once you assign a variable to the const keyword, for instance id, now that you understand the keywords of defining or rather declaring a variable, so now let's go straight into the naming conventions of variables. We already know of data types, and now we want to know more about variables. Let me just visit when it is. Yeah. So now we say I want to just leave this as capitalize it so that you can be able to see where variables start from, and you can be able to see where data types start from. So you see data types. Yeah. So now on variables, just like I said, there are several naming conventions. JavaScript is a programming language, and it has its syntax and semantics. So syntax is like the grammar, that the rules of writing grammar. Like in English, you just have to follow some rules when writing English for you to be to have grammatical sense. Also, there is semantics, the meaning behind whatever you're writing. So in JavaScript, there is a syntax for writing variables. Don't need the terminal now, can close it. Yeah, so a few of the naming conventions. First, I'll begin by taking you through a few of the naming cases. We have the camel case. Camel case. Camel case is the simplest way of camel case is the most common or conventionally used naming convention style because it starts with lowercase and then you capitalize every other word. So I can say 1, 2, 3, 4. So you notice that the first letter of